So my name's Estelle Marshall and I'm a retired physiotherapist. I worked in physiotherapy for 20 years before retiring. I've got a condition called HSP, which stands for Hereditary Spastic Paraplegia. And I was 40 before I was diagnosed with this. It's actually, rather than one condition, it's a wide group of conditions. There's been over 80 different genes that have been identified, which do impact in different ways. So not everybody's the same. The condition is split into two different categories. So there's pure and there's complex. Now I've got the complex form. The pure form impacts your lower limb spasticity and lower limb weakness. There's bladder and bowel problems. But then complex includes those symptoms plus other neurological symptoms such as neuropathy, ataxia, epilepsy, memory problems, include dementia, eye involvement, so optic neuritis. So there's lots of different ways that it can present. So everybody with HSP is different. It can start at different ages. I was in my 30s before any symptoms became apparent, but there's small children who are diagnosed with it, and then there's people who are like in their 60s who get diagnosed. So there's a huge spectrum of the point at which people get diagnosed. So HSP is very rare, the group of conditions. So there's less than 5 per 100,000 people that are impacted with it across the whole world. It varies in different countries, and different types of HSP are more rare than others. I've got the SPG7, which is the second most common type of HSP. With it being genetic, you can get it in different ways. So there's the dominant genes, there's recessive forms of inheritance, there's X-linked, which means it's on the X chromosome, and then there's mitochondrial inheritance. And different forms of HSP are transmitted in different ways. Now, I did last year, well, I've just completed it. I did a master's in sustainability, health and well-being. And I did my dissertation on HSP. I did qualitative research looking at HSP and how it impacts people, what information they were given, and then focusing very much on physiotherapy and exercise, because exercise is so important within HSP. And some of the key findings were that actually only 16% of people had ever even heard of HSP before they were diagnosed. So even though it's a genetic condition, there's not always a family history. Like myself, there's nobody in my family that's ever had HSP. So, you know, I mean, I've got a recessive form and nobody else has got it. So none of my siblings, no cousins, no grandparents, great grandparents, there's nothing. So there's lots of people who haven't heard of it. Now, sometimes that's because their relatives were misdiagnosed. One of the people I interviewed, the mother was misdiagnosed as having MS because there's an overlap of symptoms. So that's another reason why people haven't heard of it. And it's really not very commonly known. So HSP is in the same family as motor neuron disease, but unlike motor neuron disease, where it impacts your life expectancy, HSP doesn't. just impacts quality of your life. But like motor neuron disease, it impacts your upper motor neurons. So it's the upper motor neurons that die gradually. Now, it's similar to MS in that it's a progressive neurological condition, but with MS, you've got your myelin sheath breaks down, and that's why the messages don't get there. So it's an inflammatory response. So your own body's breaking down the myelin sheath. Whereas in HSP, it's to do with the protein production within the nerve cells, within the upper motor neuron nerve cells themselves. There's a fault in the gene, and so then the cells are basically dying, so the messages don't get where they want. But there's, with kids who start very young, sometimes they do get misdiagnosed as having cerebral palsy, and it's only one of the people I interviewed she was 19 before they changed her diagnosis from cerebral palsy to HSP. So she'd lived her whole life thinking she had cerebral palsy, and then all of a sudden was told, no, you don't, it's HSP. But the symptoms are so similar that these things do happen. And with Parkinson's disease, particularly with certain types of HSP, you get Parkinsonial traits, such as struggling to initiate the movement, difficulties turning, and these are all overlaps with Parkinson's, which is why some people do get misdiagnosed in that way. So within the research I did, what came across was it was 67% of people with HSP were exercising regularly, and people were actually identifying that the exercise was benefiting them. So there were over 100 people filled out the questionnaire, and there were 9 people interviewed, and not everybody, but quite a lot, actually spoke about the benefits of exercise, particularly that of stretching. And given with the spasticity, you've got the muscle not switching off, so the muscle switching on and then not relaxing. So that's what the spasticity is. So then what can happen is a muscle can get tighter and tighter and reduce range of movement. And it's that reduced range of movement that can stop somebody from walking. So stretching is vitally important to prevent contractures. But people were expressing that they felt much better after doing stretches and could feel the difference. But then the other thing that was highlighted was the benefits of the support group. So the HSP support group is quite an active support group, but there are support groups for all different conditions. And actually, when somebody is diagnosed with any medical condition, they're going through this real grief process, and that grief process impacts their self-management. So they actually need help to get through that, to be able to actually manage that condition. And the support group and talking to other people who have the same condition is very important. Some people struggled initially because they could see how bad it could get. You know, for somebody who's recently been diagnosed, then seeing a lot of people who are wheelchair users, but also within the support group, I run a monthly Zoom meeting, and it's quite a positive experience. So everybody's chatting, so people come and bring a problem, and then other people bring ideas and things, and there's quite a lot of wheelchair users in that, and there's one who says, you know, my wheelchair's my best friend. When people say I'm wheelchair bound, I'm not wheelchair bound. The wheelchair is what gives me my freedom. So it's about actually we look at using aids. Sometimes people look at them in a negative way, but actually the use of aids is about encouraging having a better quality of life, being able to do things they wouldn't be able to do otherwise, like get out to the pub for Brooke particularly. He likes a few lagers, and he doesn't fall over on the way back from the pub because his wheelchair is quite secure. Yeah. But it is very much about actually helping people have the best quality of life, because the disability is going to be there. It's about managing that condition and helping them to live well. So physiotherapy in particular, within the study, there were really good examples of advice that physiotherapists had given that people had taken on board and were still doing years later. Now that was clearly, the examples were when a physiotherapist explained things very well. And a physiotherapist's able to break things down and actually teach somebody exactly where. So having a look and going, well, it's those muscles that are tight, it's that. So looking at the gait analysis, and also looking at different walking aids. It's vitally important. Occupational therapy is important as well for having that good quality of life. It's about managing things. Having things like, I've got grab rails in the home which help me, and just make my life better and easier. And that's what, but within therapy, I think what's really important is looking at the long term, because within the NHS, you're only going to see that person for a short snippet. They're still going to be disabled for a long, long time. It's about how can you equip that person so that in a few years' time, what the advice you've given them is still going to be useful. So it's about educating that person for their self-management, and that's very much the key to it.